Setting up. Right, and I believe we are live.
Cool.
Setting up. Right. Okay. So, Sam, do you want to introduce yourself first of all, whilst I do other little bits and pieces?
Sure thing. I am Sam Skelt. I'm currently the UK editor for Freedom News. Uh, I have been involved in Freedom for quite a while now. I've passed through the shop and been involved in a bit of publishing and have now worked my way into the news collective. Uh, that's me.
Have you been finding it?
It's been good. It has been a lot. It's been interesting. I don't have a lot of editorial experience, so there's been a bit of learning kind of going on and stuff. But I'm passionate about anarchism. I'm passionate about freedom. I'm passionate about news. Uh, so kind of with all that, kind of what can go wrong?
There. Okay, I have now done all the various bits of sharing. So we had a topic list, was sort of written up, going through what we want to be talking about. Should say Uri, who is our esteemed editor, is very tired today, so won't be here for this one, but will hopefully be around for the next one. So this one will be essentially so we can start with an introduction of what we're sort of hoping to do, which is a combination job of there's not really a outside of Martin Wright and AK Red and Black, is it something like that? There's not really a regular anarchist kind of take on the news, and it's also potentially good way of us addressing kind of articles that we brought up in the course of the week, which are of particular interest to anarchists. Plus a little bit of promotion to say, come and get involved and, write some stuff for us, essentially. We're always looking for writers. And on our agenda is, first of all, the Anarchist Bookfair and the Journal, I think, on the grounds that those happened last Saturday. How do you feel about the book fair this time around, Sam?
Yeah, I think it was a another good one. It's always perhaps a little less busy than last year, but still very busy. It was good to see, so many new faces, so many old faces. It was there was plenty of talks. Yeah, no, it was good, a lot of fun.
It's often difficult because obviously when you're working on the stall or doing sort of bits as an official freedom person, it's much more kind of rushing
Mm.
around doing things than it is kind of going to the meetings. So you don't get to have that proper interaction with it a lot of the time, I think.
Yeah, I think that was like, there was kind of quite a lot of stuff that, I mean, the reason I didn't go into a bit more detail there was because as you say, so I didn't get to go to, I don't think I went to any of the events because I was doing a fair bit of, well, say networking. I think some of it was probably better described as socializing, but, sort of going around, sort of talking to people, doing my bit for Freedom News, trying to kind of convince people to send us press releases and or just comments on what they're doing regularly and the like. So, but yeah, no, it's kind of good being there in a more official capacity. It's yeah, doesn't leave you a lot of room to sort of do sort of the other stuff.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I look. It's. I think. So I know from a bit of feedback that they are going to be looking. I think they're going to be needing to do a bit of fundraising because obviously these events are
Yeah.
expensive. Um, so it's probably worth keeping an eye out for any call outs for cash in the next wee while, I think. Um, but they are looking to be back at Rich Mix next year as well, I think. So hopefully carrying it on as usual.
Yeah, it's nice to sort of see, have a kind of consistent space. There was obviously a couple of years where I had to switch around a few times, and I think once again there was a bit of a drop off in numbers. So having having a regular space is definitely
Well, especially
something.
because the London Radical Book Fair, which has been kind of for a few years was being done in Goldsmiths, was
Mm,
a really good sort of summer version essentially, where you could sort of have two book fairs either end of the year. But they've been having trouble because I think Goldsmiths they ended up losing the venue. Um,
yeah,
so I think they're looking for at the moment they are looking for another venue for the summer.
I was gonna ask about that because there was definitely rumours last year that it would be kind of back with us. I can't remember when the last one was now. Was it
Who,
2019 or was there been one since the
no, I'm sure there's been one since then. That seems too long. That's like 5 years now.
yeah, it doesn't seem right, but I'm trying to remember if there's been one since the pandemic. I might have missed one, of course.
I
But
think there might have been a smaller one after the pandemic because obviously you've got 2021, 20, maybe 2022. There was a small one or something. I
possibly.
need to look it
Either which
up.
way, it'd be good to see a return of the Radical Book Fair. That's sort of it's I try not to be too sectarian, so it's always good to see what you know the comrades from other tendencies are getting up to. Find out which new Trotskyist group is beefing with which old Trotskyist group.
Yeah, I mean there was a marked lack of beefing this year. I don't think I think there was a very minor set to with a pirate, and that was about it really.
Blimey. But yeah, no,
I
it's kind of
pirates for you, isn't it?
it's just always it's always the debate, isn't it? The kind of the playful kind of annual fight. Obviously, you don't really want to see comrades fighting, but it had become a bit of a tradition, and now we're not sort of seeing as much of that. It's sort of a question, is that sort of this nice signal that like people are getting on better than ever before, or is it a kind of terrible loss of tradition?
I mean, probably a bit of both. I would imagine. But okay, can move on to
But
so. Hmm?
with the book,
You are breaking up a bit. Could you try logging back in because you're not. Sorry about the technical bits for anyone watching. Okay, so Sam's dropped off. Hopefully, we'll log in again in a second. So yeah, I can sort of move on to other newsy bits in the meantime. So sort of the freedom news stories of this week, there are sort of three which are particularly of note, I suppose, for anarchists. I mean, they're all good, but the first one would be, I think Sam's back.
oh,
Um,
uh, am I
yes,
back?
yes, you are.
Excellent.
Inevitable on our first attempt.
Yes, sorry about that. I was
No worries.
what
Uh,
happened, but I've turned off all other internet using devices.
Good, good. So I was just about to start on talking about, first of all, Peter Kennard's exhibition, which we've got a piece about in the on freedom. And of course, here's the front page of our August journal, which we have brought out the latest edition of, um, available from currently one good bookshop, but seems to be available at various others as well.
Yeah, I dropped off a box at Houseman's as well.
Oh,
Oh,
great. Uh, two
uh,
good bookshops.
Yeah,
Can't say fair on
two
that.
good bookshops. I think we can definitely say there's, and as I understand it, there's wads of papers being sent off to various places in the post as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've been quite. I think we've been quite lucky with front pages over the last while because we've had some cracking artists working on them. Um, but Kennard's actually sort of a legit long-standing activist artist, most famous for folks wondering for a piece. If you remember a collage of Tony Blair taking a photo of himself grinning in front of a giant explosion around the time of the Iraq War, that was Peter Kennard, and he's been doing satirical artwork ever since, really. And the interview feature with I'm not going to try and pronounce that name because I would definitely butcher it. Is excellent and well worth a read. It's basically talking, a bit about his approach to art and his history doing it, and also about the exhibition, which is on at Whitechapel Gallery through to I think it's January, which is a sort of a retrospective. It's titled Archive of Dissent and is well worth going to have a look at.
January 19th, 2025. It's the end date. But
yeah. So yes, I would thoroughly recommend that. The other two articles which I picked out were first of all the eviction of the new ZAD, or what would have been the new ZAD, in France, which is I think it's the A69 off the top of my head. I don't know whether you know about this one.
I do. I do not. I'm just trying to
So,
find it.
so well, you know the original ZAD, I suppose.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Okay, so for people watching, the original ZAD was, I think, it was against an airport expansion or an airport construction project in France, and it has, for years and years, it became a major cause célèbre in France, involving the construction of many unofficial houses on sort of agricultural land around the area, in direct confrontation with the state, which obviously had this giant building project it wanted to get done, and have been very successful in doing so. It has a lot of actually both the ZAD and that ZAD and this one have had a lot in common with the successes of the road protest movement in the UK in the 1990s, and the ways in which essentially they captured, occupied land and then made it extremely difficult for police to dislodge them. Also, actually, with to a degree with HS2, although I think the Stop HS2 campaign, whilst it did a lot of occupied areas, it didn't have the same popular impact, I suppose.
No, in fact, almost the opposite.
Yeah, but and this one sort of again similarly, I suppose. The A69 protest, it's against a giant highway being built through the south of France, which is similar to HS2, is kind of grubbing up vast tracts of sort of ancient forest and agricultural land, and they've been sort of attempting to make the project too difficult to continue. The unfortunate thing is that they have now, to a large extent, it seems, been evicted through some very violent approaches by the police. This is included in at least one case. The tree climbers, who are known as squirrels, which I quite like, they were being essentially dragged out of the trees, and at least one of them had their spine broken on the way down. So the police have not been kind in their approach to doing this.
Well, French police, of course, not exactly known for their tenderness.
No, well, especially they've got sort of their equivalent of the Met Bash Squad,
Oh yeah,
which
The
they obviously send into. I think they've actually got an entire professional unit, which is supposed to be specifically for getting people out of trees and all this kind of stuff, which has a very bad reputation.
Well, indeed, and there's long history of no love lost between anarchists and cops. But yeah, the no, it's sort of interesting because I do, these sorts of things do kind of offer, they are interesting insofar as they offer good opportunities for kind of kind of anarchist or anarchist as sort of adjacent politics to be kind of practiced in a sort of sort of small area, and with its overlap with other movements as well, an opportunity for us to kind of practice what we preach through through kind of example, which is obviously kind of very good for that. But then there's also the other side of this being sort of infrastructure is increasingly sort of people kind of wanting to use their infrastructure, wanting more and better infrastructure, is a kind of obvious kind of clashing point. So obviously we're seeing kind of quite a lot of pushback against environmentalists. There's that the eviction does have a kind of that kind of, I think, that overlap with sort of as with any of these things, you're sort of seeing that the same sort of rhetoric that gets used with Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil, which once again you saw reflected in the anti-HS2 protests. So it's kind of I think it's kind of a difficult one way, or you kind of you don't want to be seen as sort of getting in the way of working people, but at the same time, these projects are also can be hugely destructive.
Yeah, it's a difficult one because I think one of the things as well is that certainly in the UK, the government has latched on to disruption of these kinds of projects as um, they've strongly emphasized this is a kind of anti-democratic project, and have sort of said, well, they're trying to stop working class people getting to work and all this kind of stuff.
Mm.
Which I think the problem, of course, is not that these projects are being resisted. It's that the way that the government frames these things is, if we don't build this project, then working people will be impacted. As opposed to, well, the problem is actually that you're making these projects not for working people at all. You're doing it entirely for commercial interests, and you're not actually working through the process of these projects in a way which is designed around what working people need. I mean, HS2 is not a project which is designed for effective mass transporters in as much as it is high-speed transport for middle class and upper middle class people. I mean, anyone who's taking mass transport by rail seriously, the first question is, how do you get the price down? Not, can I shave half an hour off the timing of the trip, right? The amount of money that they spent on HS2 was vastly in excess of what they could have spent to get working class people, say, in the extremely badly connected north, much better services.
Well, absolutely.
And building giant new highway projects has a very similar kind of value system to it. It's not really about helping people to get an ambulance to the hospital, because a giant highway across France is not the short route to the hospital, right? Like that's for transport systems, that's for sort of long distance movement of people. And most of them are going to be, all of these modern projects, they're all sort of toll roads and stuff, which is, again, designed for people with a bit more money to get around more easily, rather than for anything to do with building sensible networking systems for everybody.
Yeah.
I think it's quite difficult, though, to make those, to properly kind of project those values when you're kind of having to do 20 seconds of talking while up a tree, the cops trying to drag you out of it.
Well, I mean that yeah, this is a kind of continuous problem is the kind of problem of how we get our messages across and why sort of a well, I mean I guess there's also another debate in that as well is whether or not they are working because arguably sort of climbing up a tree you may not be able to get your point across in the moment, but there's something to be said for the fact that like it's attention grabbing and it has people whether or not even if it even if it's kind of fairly negative, people are still talking about it and that's sort of drawing attention to it. Obviously, more debate around whether or not that is an effective tactic, but like I put myself in the column of like at least people are talking about it when it comes to these big attention grabbing sort of type things.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, any strategy which is direct action focused. I think people who would like direct action, which is, universally popular, are probably barking up the wrong tree, because
Mm.
much like any effort to try and make the word anarchism, um, a popular word is going to be undermined consistently by the state and commerce and all the rest of it, say sort of deliberately misinterpreting or downplaying or slandering the word. Any project which is disruptive to commerce as usual, to the state's priorities, it's going to be monstered. This is a continuing and very consistent aspect of how we confront vested interests, essentially. So there's never going to be a situation where the Daily Mail is saying "Good on you, well done" for disruptive activity. It's just a case of trying to do the best you can within a difficult system, I suppose, under those circumstances.
Sure, and there's definitely a balancing act as well to be sort of struck there because there is that kind of if you're you're not just also trying to draw attention to stuff, you are also actively opposing it. So there is that kind of question of like sort of whether or not kind of occupying these spaces, blocking the roads, blocking the building work and sort of stuff like that. You're sort of just kind of getting in the way and sort of being unhelpful or whatever and stuff like that. It's like, well, yeah, that's kind of the point. And then there's that, like I said, it's that kind of I guess it depends on the action, sort of, doesn't it? It's there's certain things where there's, especially when there's a sense of urgency, um, sort of if you look at Palestine Action and their kind of actions, you've got people who sort of see their actions as, them going and, to various places and, doing what some people would call criminal damage, is, the argument obviously being that, we're not looking for your approval in this action. We're actively trying to stop an ongoing situation. And, the damage that we're doing, is, not as big and certainly less criminal than the damage that we're preventing. And, that doesn't need the kind of approval of the kind of, the sort of, the Sun or the Daily Mail readers, or even the Guardian readers for that matter. Like, there's the twofold, like I said, aspect of, immediacy combined with also people are talking about it, which, sort of, even if it is a negative way, I still do think that, it's quite
Yeah.
positive.
I mean, ultimately, none of these actions are going to change the minds of people who are already committed in how they think about activism and consider activists as an irritant and um, negative force, etc. But manifestly, they are actually quite good at mobilizing people who are already kind of in our frame of mind, right? Like one of the things I think that has been notable about, for all I have my own criticisms of XR in their early days and JSO now, one thing you can't say about them is that they don't walk the walk, right? Or
No.
sorry, and like people respond to that. People respond to people who are actually prepared to put their money where their mouth is. Like you used to see this with anti-fascism as well, right? Like and kind of groups who were prepared to get out there and do stuff. Uh, People kind of found their way to them because people are looking for a means to make an impact, and they people aren't stupid, right? Like you can see, I mean, you can look at things like the sewage crisis, right? Like the whole outflow uh, from water companies into the rivers. The fact is that there's now been what two years of solid campaigning over this, and there's been absolutely no movement, no change. Like Ofwat has basically just said, well, you don't know what you're talking about, and we're just going to kind of fine them a bit, maybe, and we'll kind of talk to them a bit about this, that, and the other, and then they just let them raise the rates on everybody. And it's like you kind of you look at that, and obviously people are going to be like, okay, so what else can we do? Like, if we can't just complain our way into change, there's got to be something else we can be getting on with. So you start, and then you end up with like non-violent protests, and obviously those don't tend to make a lot of difference either. And then you kind of, that's your general pipeline, and it doesn't really require the construction of a movement from scratch. It's people are looking to find ways to be more effective, and direct action is a draw under those circumstances.
Mm. I mean, yeah, I mean, taking it back to the 90s, I think a really good, you mentioned the road protests as well, but then you also had the, the live export demo against like the live export of veal and sort of stuff like that, and it's a very good example where you had like if you look at the kind of newspaper reports and the interviews and sort of stuff like that, you sort of see like there's all sorts of people who are kind of motivated by quite an emotive issue. And these are like little old grannies and sort of middle class mums who just they don't like the idea of little baby cows being hurt, and so they're kind of going out and doing kind of quite they're sitting in the road, they're blocking traffic, they're blocking the lorries, they're kind of pushing back when the police go in and go turn violent. They're all of a sudden they have to sort of defend themselves and sort of stuff like that. So there's that, and that's and ultimately it was that was what kind of put an end, or at least sort of prevented the use of those roads at the very least. But they made everything a lot more sort of difficult, and that that was a very good example of um the that thing you don't know exactly what we were just talking about.
Yeah. All right, which can bring us on to something related, actually, which is La Zone, the founding of a new social centre in Exarchia, which I will continue to butcher that name. I apologise to anyone who knows how to pronounce it properly. So for people who don't know, Exarchia in Athens is a very famous zone for anarchists, probably the most consistently occupied zone in Europe, unless you're talking about Christiania or whatnot, but consistently in a kind of confrontational against state priorities kind of way. And it abuts onto the Athens Polytechnic and has been historically very connected to that, sort of following on from the Polytechnic uprising, the fall of the junta, and kind of the connection of the resumption of Greek democracy to what was the policy of not allowing police and troops uninvited onto Athens, onto university grounds. So Exarchia has, since the re-election of New Democracy, which is a conservative Greek party, essentially, in recent years, the area has come under a great deal of pressure, partly because New Democracy rescinded that kind of safety net with the universities, but also because it very deliberately went after squatted social centres, partly sort of, on the grounds of safety and getting rid of hooligans, partly as an anti-migrant measure because there are various or have been various migrant squatted social centres in the city and in that area. So it's very good news for that for Greek anarchism, that they have a new social centre being set up. And the article is actually an excellent interview, which I would thoroughly recommend, talking about kind of the reasoning of the people setting it up, these challenges that they're facing, and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I think a lot of this connects Europe-wide with a decline in the squatted social centre movement and more pressure that's been put on.
Yeah. Greek anarchism not an area of expertise for me, I'm afraid. But like as you said, one thing I have been aware of is there's the eviction of social centres across Europe has notably picked up. I think particularly, I want to say since the pandemic, but I'm not entirely sure if that was kind of really.
I'd say it
I mean, it was
accelerated.
definitely
Yeah.
starting before that, but it seems to have picked up in the last 5 years in particular.
Yeah. So a lot seems to be, so Exarcher is another example, but I think a lot of it connects to gentrification. And that connects to, particularly during the pandemic, you have this obviously massive transfer of wealth that goes upwards. And whenever this happens, you get a situation where assets are being bought up and things are being developed by by the very rich and big firms, which are looking to, find somewhere to store all this congealed wealth that they've picked up. So yeah, I mean, infamously in the US, you've had this massive buy-up program from big financial institutions, which has accelerated the housing crisis in general. And I think that also reflects in Europe, as far as I can tell. I mean, fairly famously in Berlin, there's been
Mm.
various evictions have been going on, and there's been a kind of a rapid rise in house prices. I mean, in London is obviously just horrific. Um, but I think that Athens is also, you know, gonna, like anywhere else, is going to be affected by that kind of project.
Sure, I think because you've also seen it in Barcelona and like in Spain and Italy and as well. I'm just trying to, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I definitely followed the some of the kind of big evictions of kind of places which been occupied for well over 30 or more years. Um, it's always kind of kind of great shame when that happens, because once again, as I was saying before with the other things, sort of it provides a good opportunity for us to sort of you know um give sort of small real life examples of how we can work together to do things in anarchist ways. Likewise though, it's always nice to see when these things pop up again. And hopefully it'll be this space will be able to be defended and will prosper.
Yeah. Yes, and for anyone wanting to know more, as I say, there's an article on the website, and obviously you can look up the place itself, La Zone, in Athens, which is the connection there being it was named partially after Zona Défense. So there you go. All right, so I think that covers the basics, for what's been on the website. I think we can probably call it there. I think the general plan for this will be for it to be relatively short and sweet. We've done about half hour, which I think is
Sure.
reasonable. Certainly as a test, fairly reasonable. The only other bits I would say is that obviously beyond plugging the new paper, we've also brought out a book, which look at that, perfect. So,
I had a feeling this
Sam, do
might
you want
come
to
up.
talk a little bit about what Fight for a New Normal question mark is?
Fight for a Numeral is a collection of essays on the COVID-19 pandemic. It's a good book. It's full of essays on the. I don't really know what else to say. Really, I mean, it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's
I mean, I think the
exploring
most,
sort of the pandemic and anarchism, mutual aid, and stuff like that. I don't want to give too much away. I'm not a natural
I mean,
plugger
it's an
of.
entire book. I mean, like, I mean, I think the most useful thing about it is that, as with, the most common question probably asked to anarchists is, What do you stand for, as opposed to what do you stand against?
Mhm.
And whilst this isn't an answer as such, because it's more of a selection of essays analysing and critiquing the rise of mutual aid as an anarchist phenomenon, particularly in the UK, what it does do is talk about essentially how anarchists in practice tend to act when a crisis arises. So again, for people who don't know, freedom was actually the core, like the start point, patient zero, so to speak, of the rise of the mutual aid movement in Britain during the pandemic. It was actually an article written by, I think it was our former editor, wasn't it? Zosha.
Quite
Uh,
possible.
I think it was. I think it was, which started listing mutual aid projects, which were being started by anarchist groups and radical left type groups.
I
Um,
do I do believe
and
that one of the first mutual aid, like one of the first big ones, groups was in fact started by a member of the Freedom Collective. Not that I'm, sort of going to claim responsibility for that
not
one on
not that we're
our
bragging,
behalf, but
but um, but yeah. So I think the strength of the book is essentially in describing how we act in practice, which is, you know, particularly because the movement is admittedly quite small and under-resourced these days, and therefore you get all the haphazard and kind of two steps forward, one steps back kind of stuff, and all of the kind of the problems that you tend to get with any political movement, where people kind of jump in and you have immediate crisis of everybody having different ideas about what they want to achieve and all the rest of it. But it's actually it's got a lot of very thoughtful writing on what people did and how they thought about things and what could be done better in future. So I think that's
yeah, I
um,
think it's kind of it's I think this is kind of quite an important book insofar as I personally, like I said, I do my time in the shop. I'm kind of, I spend a lot of time talking to people about anarchism. And, since the pandemic, my kind of go-to kind of answer for the, examples of kind of anarchism, sort of anarchist influence on everyday life, the mutual aid groups as a sort of, a thing. Uh, it's something that everyone was aware of, even if everyone kind of heard of it, were aware of it. Sort of quite a lot of people, sort of took part in them to sort of some extent, maybe and it's sort of like, so as far as kind of something that you can point to and sort of start bringing people round to the ideas, kind of key principles of anarchism. The mutual aid groups is such a great thing to point to, because you're very hard pressed to find someone um, who would argue against them being a good thing.
quite. On which chirpy note, I think we're probably good for this evening. Thank you to the a bare handful of people who are watching. Um, and hopefully, if people are happy enough with this, we can have another go at it next week. Cool. Well, thank you very much, Sam. And
Thank you, Sam.
we shall